Okay, hello everybody again. We are going to try to cover as much as we can of these many different nakudas we have here in the sugya, starting in the bottom of Kufay Amud Aleph, just to get back into it, that the Gemara brought over here. We're talking about the Shaila last time about Tashlumin, and if you can Kaddish Leil Shabbos. If you weren't Mekadosh Leil Shabbos, could you be Mekadosh during the day? So the Gemara at the end this says that we could be Mekadosh during the day. The Gemara had a kasha on the bottom. Eisvei, Kavod Yom, Kavod Laila, Kavod Yom Kodim. If you have, let's say, good food to eat. Somebody trying to get in. Okay. Very good. So the Gemara is saying that you have Kavod Yom, Kavod Laila, which we'll see in the Rashban, Kavod Yom and Kavod, the Shaila Kavod Yom and Kavod Laila, which one is Adif? The Rashban says clearly throughout the Sugya is referring dafka to the Sudas Hayom, not to the just eating anytime randomly during the day, but it has to be part of the Suda to be considered Kavod Yom or Kavod Laila. So Gemara says, as a kasha on this din, that we could be the Kaddish during the day if you weren't able to do it at night. Eisvei, Kavod Yom, Kavod Laila, Kavod Yom, Kodem. So we always prefer the Kavod of the day. The day is considered a greater level of Kedusha as the day goes on of Shabbos. The day progresses, gets more and more Kaddish, we say, and therefore the Kavod of the later on the day is considered Arif over the Kavod of the night. Just on Agaborche, it's a little bit of a tochacha to those who sort of dress down and play down the Kedusha by the time we get to Shal Shudas, where that's for care. It's his Gabris of the Kedusha. It's others are trying to get in here. Okay. Shalom Aleichem. So we're saying that his Gabris of the Kedusha as the day goes along, as Shabbos comes in, so we say the Kavod Yom Adif because the day, as it goes along, adds more and more Kedusha to it, which is somewhat of a tachacha to those who dress down and play down the Kedusha of Shabbos once we get to Shal Sudas time and Mincha time, because that's what we say, Rabin the Rabin, that's the most, as the Kedusha goes on, that is the most Kaddish. A fascinating thing, the Gemara says, Kavod Yom Adif. So, the Ein Lo Ela Kos Echad, Omer La Kiddush Hayom, Kiddush Hayom, Kodem L'Kavod Yom. So if you have only one kos, now here's the kasha on this halacha that we had. You can kaddish all day if you weren't kaddish at night. That if it's true you can kaddish during the day, so why would you prefer it says we already say that the preference is to give more kavod to the day than the night. So why would you be kaddish at the night if you only have one kos? Be kaddish during the day. Even if it's true, you can be kaddish during the day. Lishvachei ad lemachar. Leave the kiddush until tomorrow, which is an interesting question. What does it really mean? Does it mean we should just be hungry until tomorrow? Because you're not going to be able to eat before kiddush. So, a question. But anyway, the Gemara is asking this and saying that if it's true that you could leave it until tomorrow, lishvachei, leave it. Ad lemachar, leave it. Beitarti, do two mitzvahs with it. Do a mitzvah of kiddush, because you can kaddish. As we spoke last week about that. We see from this Gemara's kasha that the din of Kiddush the next day is not din Tashlumin, but it's an Ikar din, because it wasn't Ikar din, it was only a secondary din of Tashlumin. We can never ask this question. It would be possible to ask the question, say, let's just push it off till tomorrow. If it's a whole different din tomorrow, it's only a Kiyum B'diavad. It must mean that the Gemara is for sure taking on that the din Tashlumin during the day is still a full din Kiddush Chatchila, because the day goes after the night. The Tashlumin only begins, let's say, on Havdalah the following day, like on Monday or Tuesday, but on Sunday itself, it's considered Mamish the day itself. Anyway, that was the point from last week. Now, in the context of this Gemara, it's saying that if Kavod Yom is Adif, then leave it until the next day. Be Mekadosh L'Chatchila then, which we have to go on that presumption, and also be Mekayim the secondary din of Kavod Hayom, which the Ramban here again points out that it would only be a kiyum of Kavod Yom Tzas, the miktsas, because it's not a full kiyum, because we're not going to be actually drinking this wine during the Suda. It's going to be before the Suda. It's Mekayim Mrs. Kiddush. The Rambam clearly says a few times in the sugya here that the din of kavod yom kavod laila, the kavod is dafka during the suda siyam, not just any achila that's going to be done during the day. It might be a din of onik Shabbos, but it's not going to be a full din of kavod Shabbos. So part of the reason for that is that we discussed last week, I think as well, or the week before, that the Rambam speaks out that only those things which are kiyum of kavod Shabbos also have a full kiyum of onik Shabbos. The meal, the Suda Shabbos, he says that if you do a shinui to make it obvious that you're eating Suda Shabbos, even if you're a very wealthy person and you eat big Sudas all the time, you do some kind of a shinui that's nicker boy, that it's the Chavod Shabbos, and the Hariza Onig Shabbos. So the Iker Din Onig Shabbos is really nitkan on the Gimel Sudas of Shabbos, the 3 Sudas. There's an extra Tosefus of Onig Shabbos, anything you do during the day at all, but the Iker Din Onig Shabbos is really during the Suda, and that's what Rashbam keeps on pointing out. So over here, even Kiddush that is made for the sake of the Suda, and it's not, but as long as it's not inside the Suda, it's not part of the actual Suda after Amotzi, the Rashbam still calls that only a mixas kiyum of Onig Shabbos, Kavod Shabbos, because the Kavod Yom Odif, because it's not actually during the meal. Okay, so going on here. So it says that, so the Gemara asks the Kasha, that again, why don't we push it off? So it answers, Chaviv mitzvah shaita, because of this concept of Chaviv mitzvah shaita, which the Rashbam says we learn it out from Haktaras, Chalavim, Vevarim, that on Shabbos we have the Karbanos Shabbos, the Karbanos Tzibur, the Korban Tamid of Shabbos, which we know that by all Karbanos that are niktar during the day, the Chalavim, Vevarim, the extra things that you didn't manage to burn during the day, you're allowed to burn them at night. It's not considered nosar until the next morning. So that's it. We're done by all Karbanos, and this as well. So since it's kosher kol halayla, so why would one take these things and after you check the korban? I understand the korban tamid has to be brought. So you have to do zrikas adam. You have to burn the ikar of the korban, but whatever's left over, the extra chalav and vevarim that are kosher all night. Why be docha Shabbos for that? Why should we push off Shabbos if you could do it chatchila at night? So we see from here the concept of chaviva mitzvah shaita, that it's a mitzvah is more beloved at its time. Since the time of this korban is during the day of Shabbos, it's a korban tamid shel Shabbos. So its mitzvah shaita would be to bring all of the korban, the entire korban, if you can, which you're not so busy on Shabbos with other korbanos, so there's time to do that. Then that's dochas Shabbos because of this concept of chaviva mitzvah shaita. It's a very amazing thing that the fact that a mitzvah is beloved in its time is such a strong concept that even is dochas Shabbos. Pella.
How come we don't say that by bris milah when the baby was not born naturally? Then, like, if he's born like a normal circumstance, then we do, and then it's dochas Shabbos. We do the bris milah. But if not, if it's like cesarean or something, then we push it off till Sunday because we say it's still going to be good on Sunday also. And this isn't like a natural birth. Why don't we just say chaviva and mitzvah b'shaita? It would be better to do it on the 8th day.
So chaviva mitzvah shaita means that on the day that you're mechuyev to do this, like let's say this korban, its day is Shabbos. So, but the whole din of Yom Shmini we learn out that it's Ishaki Sazriya, just learn a part of Tazriya, that only if she's derech Zriya, derech Leda, it says that Yom Shmini, Yom B'Sar Lasa, the din that's mechuyev and Yom Shmini, that we will call it shaita, that's only by a baby that's with a natural birth. If it's not, so then call young shaita. There's no, yes, we say the sooner the better, shouldn't push it off, but there's no shaita. There's no time you could say now it's shaita, because the din Yom Shmini was exeres kasav, was said by a natural birth, not by a cesarean.
So like a baby that was born cesarean or something like that, we're saying that there's not any particular mitzvah to do it on the 8th day versus the 10th day or the 12th day, other than just like maybe zrizin, makdim, and the mitzvahs or something like that. But it's not called the actual time of the mitzvah.
Right, it's not its time, because its time was nikva. Yom Shmini, Yom B'Sar Lasa, the Gemara learns a hekesh with that, and Ishakisa Zriya, if it's Makam Zriya, Makam, then it came out Makam Zriya in the normal way, then there's a din of Yom Shmini. So this is not at all to say that you can just randomly push off a bris if it's not natural birth. You can just, you're supposed to do it as soon as possible. There are shitas that there's a question of chorus by pushing it off, kol rega v'rega, but that probably doesn't apply to Tinuk. Tinuk's not a bar chorus, but it's mechiv on the father as soon as possible. But still, it's not a, you can't call it shaita. It's time to say that it's Docha Shabbos.
Right.
Okay. So now it's a peladik that we'll take this a little bit further and then we'll come back to this Nakuda. The Gemara goes on to say, do we really say this concept of Chaviv Mishaita? Batanya, we have a brisa, Nichnas Abesa of Moshe Shabbos, Varach ala Yain Valamor Valabasamim, Vacharkak Omer Abdallah Alakos. Somebody walks into their house, Moshe Shabbos, after they daven in shul, they come home Moshe Shabbos, they should make a bracha on the Yain, what you do, Break Ber Gofen, Break Mera Eish, Break Mera Basamim, and afterwards they make Abdallah. All you have is one kos yayin. You want to eat milava malka and eat and bench, so you need a kos to bench. So we see that we don't say mitzvah because lamaisa here we're pushing it off. We're saying shaita is right now to make Abdullah, and you're pushing it off in order to bench with the kos. The chaviv shaita should be docha the benching with the kos. So he answered back and said, I'm not so wise, I'm not a navi, it's not my own opinion, like a marnava sadarna, and I'm just misadar things. So the Shban has a whole because over here to explain what are these all, each one of these things mean. That what I'm saying is that I am not the one who made this up, and I'm not making up this din of chaviv mitzvah shaita, and I'm also not making up this brisa, but I'm just misadar things, and I'm telling you that they're both true. That there is din chaviv mitzvah shaita, and there's also this brisa is also true. And why is that so? Why is this not a steer to chaviv mitzvah shaita? More in Shaimilan bein iluya yama lafuka yama. You have to mechala between when we say chaviv mitzvah. We said previously we apply the concept of chaviv mitzvah to kiddush. So we apply it to kiddush. We're not going to apply it to afuka yama to Havdalah. Why? Yula yama kol kamin adif mechavenle. By Yula yama bringing Shabbos in, the more we can be makdim it, it's better. So that's the chavivus is to do it. The chaviv b'shaita is to do it as soon as possible to bring Shabbos in. Fuka yama, machquinale kekad lahavi katuna. But for carrot on Motzei Shabbos, then we try to push it off as much as we can, and not to hurry up and do it, but dafka to push it off, in order to the Shabbos shouldn't look like a heavy weight on us that we're trying to get rid of. So
was this Malava Malka or Shalashudas that we were?
You're talking about he wants to eat Malava Malka now. He wants to eat Malava Malka.
He can eat before Havdalah?
That's the chiddush of this whole one of the chiddushim of this whole thing. I mean, Tosas actually points out when they're going to say afterwards there's 8 shmaminas. Tosas
leaves out that one.
Asked that we left out that one. What about the shmamina that you could eat before Abdullah in order to be able to have bench on a kos? That's a huge shmamina. Why did we leave that one out? Balkopanim, that's a part of the chiddush over here. Now, this whole Gemara seems to be very prolific Gemara, because again, we start off saying that we learn out chaviv mitzvah shaita from Hekter Cholam Ve'Varim. The Rashbam brought down. It's a Gemara back in Samach Chesam Abayz. We Farish learn out this din of chaviv mitzvah shaita, which is a din deraisa. It's a svara deraisa. Such a strong svara that it's mamash docha Shabbos. So we know there's such a concept. So it's a pella that why would the Gemara ask Umi Amrinan? Umi Amrinan chaviv mitzvah shaita. Do we say such a thing? What about this brisa? So how can we suddenly bring a brisa and try to slug up a din that we know that we learn out a din deraisa? that we're dochas Shabbos in order to be maktir the Chalom and Vivarim in time on Shabbos when we could do it later on. So we see that there's a bona fide, powerful svara of Chavius Vashaita on a derisidical level to be dochas Shabbos. Now we have a question from a brisa for Kiddush and Abdullah, from Abdullah and benching, that we're going to say, is there such a concept of Chavius Vashaita? So I think that's why the Rashbam said here, Rashbam was very careful to add these words in. See how precise the Rishonim are. Mi amrina gabe bracha chaviv mitzvah shaita. Do we see it by a bracha? In other words, we're not asking a kasha on the whole concept of chaviv mitzvah shaita. For sure, it applies by a mitzvah. The chiddush is, do we say it also by brachas? We know that a mitzvah shaita, it's a real chiyuv, actual chiyuv mitzvah in its time. We know that's one thing. But by brachas, do we also say it? The Gemara wanted it when it said, Amalek, when he asked the kasha, why don't we push off Kiddush till tomorrow and be Mekayim both dinim, mitzvah Kiddush and the mitzvah of Kavod Yom Adif? So the answer, Chaviv mitzvah shaita, you say a Kiddush that we say this concept of mitzvah shaita even by something which is just a bracha. It's not an actual mitzvah. Now, it's very interesting because, I mean, the bracha that we're talking about is not just a bracha. The mitzvah of Kiddush is a bracha. That is the mitzvah of Kiddush. So it's a little bit, the Rashbam is answering our kasha, he's trying to answer our kasha, but it's hard to understand totally how he's answering it, because some mitzvahs are a mitzvah, like the Hakdaras, Evarim, and everything like that, the bringing the korban, that's a mitzvah. It's going to be a mitzvah of shaita. So the mitzvah of Kiddush is a bracha. He's bothered by this and he's trying to answer something, but I'm not totally sure how it's an answer. See if anybody here has a terrace to this. I don't have a real good shot in it, but the Rashbam is saying something. I'm just not sure how it really answers the kasha, because here the mitzvah is the bracha.
Aren't brachos usually like a hakdama to the mitzvah, like the Kiddush Hayom? Yes, there's a bracha there, but it's the Kiddush on the yayin, as opposed to doing an actual mitzvah. It's usually like a hektim to a mitzvah. We don't see the berachas lulav is a brach, like is the mitzvah. It's a precursor.
What you're saying is exactly my point. Bishlema, if we were talking over here about a berachas of mitzvahs, you have a mitzvah and there's a bracha on it, so you could say, okay, maybe the bracha doesn't have the same kedima to it if for some reason it's on a coast. But when it comes to Kiddush, we're talking about not just doing a berachas of mitzvahs, talking about pushing off the whole Kiddush until the next day because of Chiv Mitzvah Shaita. Talking about, we're applying that to the concept of Chiv Mitzvah. And here we're also pushing out the Havdalah. According to the Rambam, Havdalah is a mitzvah deraisa. The Rambam, which we quoted last week, says it's a mitzvah the Kaddish as a Shabbos, but Kinisasa b'Yitziasa. So we're Kaddish the Shabbos b'Yitziasa idea Havdalah. So the Havdalah comes out to be the mitzvah of Kiddush of Kavod Shabbos to Kiddush b'Yitziasa. We're pushing that off. It's not a bracha on the mitzvah. Here the bracha is the mitzvah. So that's why I have difficulty understanding the Rashbam's teretz. He's obviously answering our kasha, but I have trouble understanding that. You follow? The chiluk between that and berachas mitzvahs. Okay. Anyway, but the Rashbam, so we'll leave that short right now, but I don't have really answer for that. But the Rashbam later on explains this answer, the Gemara answer, there's a difference between Iyulu Yama and Nefudi Yama. Rashbam said Iyulu Yama, Mechavavinan le, Ba'avdin Kiddusha mi'orta. We're Mechavav the Shabbos and we do the Kiddush at night, in order to do it as quickly as possible. The Chaviv mitzvah shaita, there's reason makdim in the mitzvah. Here the Rashbam asserts the concept of reason makdim in the mitzvahs. So and he's obviously he's trying to show us why we have to hurry up and do it. Chaviv mitzvah shaita means not just to do it in its time, but to do it as soon as possible in its time, because it's reason makdim in the mitzvahs. If that's the pshat in Chaviv mitzvah shaita, it's even a bigger chiddush. The fact that we're going to docha Shabbos, where we docha Shabbos to be makter the Avarim when we could do it Motzei Shabbos, and we're Machal Shabbos anyway to do it because of Zizim Makdim in the mitzvahs. It's somewhat of a pella. That that's such an important concept that it's mamash docha Shabbos. So Saul brought down the Shem of Menachem Pertzovich Zatzal, the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, that he learns that it's only after we learn from Avram Avinu that the Gemara learns out that says that by Avram, when he was told to do the Akedah, V'yashkem Avram B'boker, he got up early in the morning to do the Akedah. We learn from here is Zrizim Makdim in the mitzvahs. Only after you have that limud is Zrizim Makdim, so then that coupled with the halacha of haktaras, well, the hakravas hakorban on Shabbos, the limud of hektar chalam me'varim tells us, once we know Zrizim Makdimin, the fact that we have a limud that you could be maktar that on Shabbos tells us that chivuv mitzvah shaita is a general concept all over, and it tells us that it's even docha other isurim. Such an important thing. So Zrizim Makdim, this is not the entire reason for it, but it's part of the svara. It's the hagdama to the whole concept of this idea of chivuv mitzvah shaita.
Can Rabbi explain that last part again? I didn't quite understand how he developed that. Because we have because we know that we're allowed to do a hakravas korban, and because we also have a concept of zrizin makdim in the mitzvos, so therefore we know that it applies to everything.
Yeah, that's what he said. That's just Kiddush. I didn't see it. I didn't quote it. He said that, in other words, the Torah, there's a limud back in Samach Chesam and Beis that tells us that you should be maktar the environment even on Shabbos, even though they're kosher on Motzei Shabbos, because we know that all the Haktaras Evarim are always kosher the following night after the day of the Korban Korban. So the Torah is megala to us to do it during the day. So if I wouldn't have a concept, I guess, of Zuzim Makdim Mitzvahs, I would just think maybe that it's just an isolated din by Korbanos, that you do it on the day of the Hakrava. But after the din is Zuzim Makdim in the Mitzvahs, so then Rav Nachum learned. I didn't see it inside his thought. This kind of quote from Rav Nachum was, everything he said, every word he said was built on a vast rayas of within the sugya. So I don't know what his rayas were, but I just saw this one nakuda in his name that, coupled with the concept of Zrizim Makdim, then this is a gility to us that the Zrizim Makdim is not just a Zrizos Ba'alma, but it's mamash achiyuv. It's mamash achelik of the mitzvah. It's a chova of the mitzvah. So I'll just take a second, since we're holding my Erev Pesach on this point, to try to understand how this could be. What's the importance of zrizos of ad kadei kach? It's so important that it's mamash docha other yisurim, that the Torah tells us to do things in its time, even when it comes in conflict possibly with other things, with other yisurim, which were. So the maskana over here is that we're going to say it also by brachos. We don't say it only by mitzvahs. That's a ma'isa kiyumis. It's a mitzvah kiyumis, but brachos, whatever chiluk there is between brachos and mitzvahs, we might have thought we had a kasha on that. We say no, we do say it by mitzvahs as well, as long as there's a mila to it, because since it's built on zuzim makdim mitzvahs, it has to be that there's a mila in the hagdama of doing it b'shaita that conforms with zuzim makdim mitzvahs. Whereas Havdalah is going to be the opposite of that. It's going to look like it's the Zrizos to do Havdalah, like we say in the Zmiros in Shabbos. One of the things we sing about is Hamachrim Latzeis Umahrim Lavoy. There's a mila to be Macher Latzeis, to Macher the Yitzias of Shabbos, and Maher Shabbos to come in. That's the mila that we have. So this idea of Zrizim Makdim Mitzvahs, there's a Mechilta that learns out that it says, "Ushmartem es matzos." There's din of shmir by matzos, which we know there's a din of matzah shmura, etc. But there's so the pasuk shad is talking about shmira by the chitim, that it shouldn't become chametz or anything like that. But there's another drasha in the mechilta on that says, "Al tikre shmartes matzos eles mitzvos." Don't read it shmartes. The word matzos and mitzvos can be written the same way. It's written chaser. So matzos and mitzvahs are written the same. So it's the Torah's megala. Whenever the two things are written the same way, it's megala. There's something in common with those two things. So obviously matzah is a mitzvah, but the fact that all mitzvahs, I think that the Chazal are omid on the Nakuda that all mitzvahs somehow have perspective of matzahs. So what is that? So the Mechilta says that mitzvah sheba al yadecha al tach mitzana. The mitzvah that comes your way, don't let it become chametz. In other words, just like a matzah, if it sits too long, it becomes chametz. So a mitzvah, don't let it sit too long, it becomes chametz. So it's a pella. Maral is on this. It's a pella that how can we compare the two things? I understand there might be a ma'ila of zuzim makdim in the mitzvahs, and it's even in one of the in the kids' tapes. You play in the car. There's a song that goes with zuzim makdim in the mitzvahs. I'm sure it's so chashuv. It even has a kids' song with it, right? Zuzim makdim in the mitzvahs is a very important thing. But how could we possibly make a comparison? Chametz to matzah is not matzah, just a matzah that's missing zrizos. It's chametz. It's not a matzah at all, right? Not only you're not chayv mitzvah, you're chayv kares for eating it on Pesach. So how can we even possibly express the lack of zrizos in a mitzvah to matzah that's chametz? So we see there's some nekuda in a mitzvah that if you push it off, you don't do it as zrizos. And it's a pegia not only in the Maisa Gavra of just something you did, you weren't makayim extra mile of zrizos. There's something it's considered a pegia in the etzem hamitzvah. That's what you see from that Chazal. So Hutner, that's all very famously in his very first mimer on Pesach, one of the most famous mimer. And even those who don't quote Rav Hutner, don't learn those tablets for him, I've heard them quote this mimer, like the more starker Bali Musar that don't go for this type of machshava. This mimer they do quote, the first mimer in Pesach. So I'll just tell with Thomas, try to see it inside. It's very, very big yisod because it goes down to the whole yisod of the Leda of Klal Yisrael. Our Leda, which the reason we have matzahs, as we know on Pesach, is because the whole Leda of Klal Yisrael was bezrizos. We left mamish bezrizos. So the whole Yitzia of Klal Yisrael, the whole Yitzira of Klal Yisrael was dafka bezrizos. And that's why we had a matzah and we didn't even have time to become chametz. So there's something that goes very central to the whole yesod of the mahus of Klal Yisrael. We do mitzvah bezrizos. So we started off as zrizos. So how do we understand what's so important about zrizos? Does it just mean you can pick up many self-help books and all kinds of information out there that how don't push off till tomorrow what you can do today, and don't procrastinate and get up and do things when you can't do them. So that's a general concept out there in the world. So for that, we don't need the Torah to establish to us a new Indian of zrizos. Right? There's some new concept of zrizos over here that we would not have known without the Torah telling it to us. So what is that nakuda? How do we understand that as zrizos? So Hutner explains the following. It's a very important yesod that the Mesilas Yesharim brings down in the beginning that the neshama is forced to come down to this world against its will. The neshama is not very happy about it. It has to be squished and squeezed into this finite body, which is and it puts out most of its light, loses most of its illumination. If somebody's making it, possibly go on to mute because there's a lot of noise in the background. Thank you. Okay. So the neshama is not very happy about that, but that's its scheme. That has to be done in this world for however long it has to be here. But the Mesilas Yesharim brings down that there's a pasuk that says, in Shlomo Melech said, "But nefesh lo tamale." You can never fill up the nefesh. Anything you can bring the nefesh from this world will never satisfy the nefesh. It's like the Bas Melech, a very wealthy princess from a powerful king that has to marry a ben krach, a simple little guy. She has to go and live in a little hut at the edge of the forest. And this guy is trying so hard to satisfy his wife, the princess. He brings her this, he brings her that, things he can find in the forest. No matter what he brings her, he can't satisfy her because she's used to royalty. And one day he saves up a lot of money, and he's saving up, and finally he brings a real prize to her. He's so thrilled, he brings her a corn dog. Kavaldig. It's finally going to satisfy her, and she looks at it and almost faints, like see such a thing. no matter what he brings her, it doesn't satisfy her. The only time that she has a longing, she feels like she's ready to burst out of there is when she hears the royal procession going by, and she peeks out and she sees the royal steeds and the royal procession going by, and she sometimes sees even the king. She just wants to burst out of that place and just go and jump back on the horse and the steed and get back to the royal procession, back to the palace where she belongs. So that's the feeling the neshama has in this world, that nefesh lo tamali, no matter what we can try to give it from this world, whatever vacations and even a 24-hour Pesach tea room, it doesn't satisfy the neshama. So, the only thing that really satisfies the neshama is when it goes back to its royalty. We have 613 opportunities for it to reconnect to its royalty. Only then is the neshama happy when its royalty, the royal possessions come in this world are the Taryag mitzvahs. So the things that are holding it back, when there is a mitzvah to do, the neshama wants to just burst out of itself and go beyond anything, the shackles and the confines of this world, to be able to immediately be joined with that mitzvah. There should be nothing in its way. Our bodies, and they prevent that from happening. Things take time, and one of the creations of this world, which is probably the most ethereal creation of this world, but it's still considered a bria. We see this from the Ramban, the Gra. There was countless sources that Zman is a bria of this world. Maybe we didn't understand that Ramban. We didn't understand that Gra until relatively recently, until Einstein showed how time is something which is relative. Time is taka bria, and it changes and it warps, and it depending on where it is. And I was telling that maybe the reason that Jewish time is so late is because there's so much food. There's a time warp and things slow down. Maybe there's a slowing down of time, Jewish time. But al kapanim, the time is something which is also a bria, and the neshama, when it comes in contact with not only the body but time, so it wants to break out of that time and immediately do the mitzvah, because it's makir deep down that this is royalty. This is something that it identifies with. It's something from El Yonim. It's something from a higher place, and it wants to be there immediately. So the desire of the neshama, the dachaf, the push for the neshama to be immediately enjoying with a mitzvah, and even to try to go beyond time, that's an inner push to be to do things b'zrizos. That's the inner push. It's not just an idea that it's not good to procrastinate. It's not good to push off things. It's coming from a very pneumistic place, deep down in our nefesh, the hakara of the nefesh, that we're about to do something which is min el yonim, and the immediacy of wanting to do that pushes the body to go faster and faster until it's done b'zrizos. Say a Maisa, Reb Chaim Brisker, when Reb Chaim was a little boy in Cheder, so he was like 5 years old, that he slept in late one day. The Beis lady, his father, came in and said, Chaimke, look out the window. People are running full speed to university, and you're laying in bed. How could that? You have to get up and learn Torah. You're laying in bed. So Chaimke answered his father and said, the same thing that's making them run to the university is the same thing keeping me in bed. Maimer Muskar. So, but the deep internal feeling that we're about to do something, a Maisa Mitzvah is min el yonim. It's something it's a hechra thing. It's a higher thing that we're going to do, and the neshama can't wait for that. That's what pushes the person, and that's what the makor of the real zrizos, the Torah zrizos, comes from that. So according to that, if a person will push it off and do it without zrizos, so mitzvah ayidecha al tachmitzena. If you have time to do it and it's not so important, and you don't have that feeling you need to do it, basically you're dragging it down from being min el yonim to being just another task to be done in this world. You sucked out the kedusha, you sucked out the higher nature of that mitzvah just to put it on your task list to be done. So that's why it's considered a pekia and the gufa mitzvah al tachmitzena. Don't push it off. The Torah's megala, it's with the chavim mitzvah shaita zuzah makdim the mitzvahs, because al tachmitzena, just like chametz to matzah is not a matzah, because you dragged it down, it's no longer a matzah. There's a perspective of a mitzvah that if you don't do it b'zrizos, you've taken away from it, you've sucked out of it. It's el yonim, it's higher nature, He just made it into another thing to do. So that's why it's so important to do mitzvahs, bezuzah. And that's like Klal Yisrael. We left bezuzahs every time we can kind of Ratzon Hashem. The whole later of Klal Yisrael is through Hakara that we have the desire to be connected to Hashem, to Avodas Hashem, as soon as possible. And there's no time to waste because our Pnimius just wants to, like that Bas Melech wants to immediately back connected with the royalty. Our Nefesh wants to, Nefesh Lo Tamale, we want to immediately be connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So Klal Yisrael left this reasons. That was the later of Klal Yisrael with this this concept. So this idea of Chivuv Mitzvah Shaita, the sugya is very, very deeply tied to Pesach. Okay. We try to cover a few more points here. So we have a number of Shema Minas over here. We'll try to just cover a few points. Where it says Shema Mina, from this price that we learned, that you can push off the Havdalah and eat after do the Havdalah after Lava Malka in order that you can have a kos. We see a number of Chiddushim over here. As we pointed out before, Tosfos says it should really be 9, the fact that you can eat it all before Havdalah. We see from here, even though we're talking about someone who's coming in the house, probably they're coming from shul. We assume they're coming from shul. That's a normal thing. There's a whole huge raid in Tosa that we're not going to go into that right now because Tosa Shlamina Hamavdil B'Tfilah Tzarech Shadol Lakos. There's a long back and forth here in Tosas. If you want to look into it, it's a question of, is it really the Kuli Alma that it's a mila to do both, to do Havdalah in Tefillah and also Alakos. The Maskana of the Gemara is that Hamavda B'Tfilah Tzarech Havdalah Alakos as well. That's our price over here, but we'll just say that it's not Pashat, and there's a brisa that Tosfos mentions over there in Brachos and Lamed Gimel that's cholik on that and holds that you should not do both. But I think we're not going to go into that right now. It's a very complicated cheshbon and pshat. Just to let you know, there's a marsha. On the marsha, there's a karnei reim in the bottom of the marsha, and there's a rashash as well. And the three of them, there's 3 different mahalchim and tosas how to sort of miyashiv the sugya and brachos of the sugya over here. But I'm not going to go into that because it's really mostly technical in pshat. But it is amazing to see how deeply they went into this tosas. The second point is that Shema Mina bracha tuna kos. We see that benching needs a kos. So Tosfos has a whole back and forth over here, since it's talking about one person that came in the house in this brisa, that he was nichnas into the house, and he's waiting in order to bench on a kos, so he's pushed the whole thing off. So it doesn't say there's anybody else there with him. It doesn't say there's even a mezuman. So it's mashma from there that even a yochid, when the Mor says shlamina that bracha birch samazon needs a kos, it's mashma even a yochid needs a kos. So Tosfos has a back and forth about that. I'm sure you saw, and he says that the minig is to do it without a kos, which is brought down. He brings it's a shochar tov. V'olam ein noagin the varach because it was on alakos el begimel. Minig olam, it doesn't say who that is. It doesn't give a name to it, but the Rishonim say that it's the Midrash Nelam and Rus, and the Gra says it's a Zohar in a few places that we only bench with the kos when you have shlosha, when you have at least 3. So without going through all the cheshbonos of Tosfos and the when I'm mochiach over here that it must be Ben Shlomo Ben, it brings the Rashban and it brings the Rabbeinu Yechiel, it brings the Raya that if it was only b'shlosha, not b'yachid, so what's the problem? Why would we push off Havdalah for the sake of benching with the kos if you need 3? So if there are even if there are 3 to eat, let them eat separately. So there won't be a chiyuv of benching together. It won't need a kos. So why should we push off Havdalah? Do it Havdalah, and you won't need a kos for Birchas Hamazon. Al Ba'Kochach, you see that even b'yachid you need a kos. So the Nekudas HaMachlokas, just to summarize without going through all the cheshbonos here, it seems to be it's meduach like this in Lashon and Torah. The Nekudas Machlokas is when it says Birchas Hamazon Sarakos, is that a din in Birchas Hamazon or a din in Zimun? Is it din in the actual benching in the kos, or is it din that the Zimun, when you have the Shlosha, the Zimun, that Birchas Zimun, that the Gemara Brachos calls it Birchas Zimun, that's considered a bracha b'fnei atzma. The cheshivas of that Birchas Zimun, is that what needs the kos, or is it Birchas Hamazon that needs the kos? That's really what the shaila is. So,
what would be the nafkamina between those two?
If it's a Birchas Zimun needs kos, then it's not b'yachid. It's only Zimun b'shlosha. If it's Birchas Hamazon ton kos, then it's only even when there's one. And then we have the cheshbon tosa. If it's one, and you hold like Rabbi Gamliel that you have to actually bench on if you hold you bench on Zion Minim. So how are you going to ever finish benching? You're going to keep on benching all day. So there's a back and forth about that as well. We're not really trying to go into all the nekudas here. I just want to bring that point out that as soon as the Torah brings a raya that it's even biyachid, because the lashon of Gemara is shlamina Birchas Hamazon sarakos tuna kos. Doesn't say Birchas Zimun tuna kos. The Torah brings that as a raya, but obviously the others are holding that is a din of Birchas Zimun, and they hold the Gemara's lav dafka. Birchas Hamazon means Zimun of Birchas Hamazon.
Doesn't the Gemara just say bracha to unakos?
Yeah, it does say bracha, right? It's mashma that there's a girsa that seems a Birchas Hamazon. Some of them trying to bring a girsa like that, because we're not talking about any bracha. We're talking about Birchas Hamazon over here. That was the situation. There's a girsa like that they bring. So, but the Torah just says that if it really meant just Zimun, it should have specified, because it's very misleading to say bracha when it means Birchas Zimun. It means stuff like that. So Pashtus goes like the Ben Yechiel, even Yachid needs a kos. So Ramosha in a tshuva, the Tosas ends off that we say that Tosas la halacha paskins Birchas Hamazon to a kos. That's the psak of most Rishonim. The Russian most Rishonim, it does need a kos. The Rif and the Rambam don't mention this la halacha. They don't bring this shlamim la halacha. So the Rif and the Rambam are holding the Maskana not that way. But most Rishonim do quote this, and they paskin we need it. So how come we don't always bench on a kos? At least when we have shlosha. How many people do you know that are makpid always to bench on a kos when every time you have three people? And it doesn't say anything about Shabbos. Some people do it on Shabbos, but we don't find any chiluk in the poskim between Shabbos and the week as far as that goes. It's the question of yachid or shlosha, period. Some are makpid only when there's 10, but why not? So
is there any Torah for 10? Because I only really see by 10, or that just made up. Not made up, but is there
if for some reason, I guess people just decided to do that. I don't know. Maybe because we see it by a chasana, when we have 10, we have kosos over there. We need kosos as part of the Shabbat brachas. So it got in people's minds that it's 10. But in the Rishonim here, we don't see anything about 10. We see either 1 or 3.
Interesting.
Right. So Ramosha and Tshuva, it's really in a strange place. It's in, if you want to look it up, it's in Yordea Chela Gimel, Simon Nun Beis, Os Gimel. So Moshe says a teretz on it. He asks his kasha, and he's very bothered by it. But why is it that, where does the Minigolim come from that we see that most people are not makpid to bench on a kos, even when there are shlosha, or even sometimes even 10, especially during the week. You see it like in yeshiva, sometimes you have 10 guys that'll, for breakfast in the yeshiva in the morning, you might have 10 guys at the table on the bench, Elokeinu, but they won't bring out a kos. It was the last time on Tuesday morning in yeshiva you saw people bring out a kos, 3 or 10 or anything. So Ramosha says a fascinating vort, which is, it's actually Yesod Gadol and Psak Halacha in general. It's a teretz over here, but it's Yesod Gadol and a very fascinating, to me, incredible Yesod in Psak Halacha. Ramosha says that Mishnah Brura and the Aruch HaShulchan try to answer up that because wine is so expensive, it's not so matzui and it's very expensive and people can't really afford it. So that's why people don't do it. It's just too hard to afford it. So they were somewhat on the Rif and the Rambam. but so that's during the time of the Mishnah Berurah, maybe. The Anios was great. People were so poor in Europe. It was very difficult to get yain, and it wasn't so matzui, and it was very difficult. What do you say about today? That people have a bottle of grape juice in the fridge, and they have a whole cellar full of wine sitting there, and they bench without a kos. So it's not matzui, it's right there. It's not, people have tons of wine. So Moshe says that a Kabbalah Yesod, that since for hundreds of years there was such an anius in Klal Yisrael, people were so poor, it was very difficult to buy wine. So it was kilu huchra hadavar min hashamayim, that the Psak Halacha is like the Rif in the Rambam. Ladina, we're not mechuyev to have akos.
Is that concept? I mean, I have two questions. One is, do we have to answer up a trend in Klal Yisrael? Like, it seems like Moshe is, but that's question one. And two, is this the same thing as Yashan that was like lost from many communities?
Okay, that's that. The second one's a loaded question. The first one is we'll just say that it's not just a question of a trend. It's sometimes you'll have trends, but you'll see that the Gedolim are not knowing that way. Or much as even by Gedolim, you'll see that they sometimes are not makpi that way. So it's more than a trend. We see that these Gedolim that are very machman, everything would not allow themselves to bench without it if that was really the din. So that Moshe is coming up with this Yisod, is telling us that if for hundreds of years Klal Yisrael Taka couldn't afford it, even Gedolei Yisrael didn't have it, nobody had wine. It was so difficult to get it even for Shabbos. So it's Huchar Hadavar, hundreds of years we couldn't do it, that Kodesh Baruch Hu made it that the Allah was like the Rif in the Rambam. A big Yisod, you have to be Moshe to say that. It's like a Rishon coming to say a Yisod.
They hold that it's only that it's not required by one, but they still hold it's required by three, or they hold in general it's not required at all.
The Rif in the Rambam don't mention it at all.
Okay.
Mention with the coast at all. So appella, right? But they don't.
So is Ramosha saying that really l'chatchila you should do it every single time you're benching? You should do it with the coast, and he's just saying, but like defending Klal Yisrael, or is he saying that no, really, the Etzem Halacha is like the Rif and the Rambam, and this is a very odd proof for that.
So Ramosha ends off saying that even according to the Rif and the Rambam, it's only a question of chiyuv. That we have sugyas and brachas to say that there's a tremendous bracha that's chal on a person on their house if they bench with the coast. It brings all kinds of shefa brachas from Shemayim, and for sure the Rif and the Rambam agree to all that. It's really just a question of chiyuv. So he says for sure it's a mila if you're able to afford it, and it's wine is matzui for sure. If you can, it's a mila to do it for sure, without question. But it's just he's explaining why many are not makpid on it. There shouldn't be a kas on them. They're going keneged halacha. They're not keneged halacha, but they're a mila for sure. There is the Rif and the Rambam, especially that there are many that say it's a chiyuv. But even those who say it's not a chiyuv, for sure a mila there is, and a bracha to the house, a big bracha for the house there is. So because of that, Ramosha, I'm makpid when we have three. At least I would set a pli neder. Trying to do a pli neder, but it's always have a kos. I usually end up benching with three during Shabbos anyway. I don't bread all
this is really like an az kanamer type of issue. So I feel like if I were to like go in random situations every time I have three people and tell them like we need a kos, like I don't think people would take me so seriously.
I don't think that you would have to say we need a kos. If you would say, oh, I'd like to bench with a kos, so that's what I like to do, then I don't think anybody. It's not about taking you seriously. It's about okay, fine. You like to do that, we'll do it. I want to make it like come and make a crusade to. They'll say hakos Yiddish or cup. Okay. Never pun intended. Okay. Go on to another Nakuda here. Time to really talk about everything, but so we'll try to do quickly. The Gemara says Shlamina Ta Mavdil. So Yeah. So just a subtle nukud over here is that Tosa says Shlomo Tam Avdil. Well, Yamtim ad lamachar kodam achila. Don't wait till tomorrow. In other words, you see that the machlokas, whether Tam Avdil or not, is not if you can make Abdullah at all, but if you have to wait till the next day. So just a little pellet to me that why would tomorrow be different than tonight, than the first night? What's tomorrow is just, it's only Zman Abdullah after the night, like we said in last sugya. It's because Yom Holach Achar Laila. So how does it help that it's the next day? If it's still after the time that he was telling him in the night, it's still this one time of Abdullah from Motzei Shabbos till the end of Sunday. So, and that's the Ikar Din. So what does tomorrow help? But you can say maybe, because we're talking about a knas over here, the Ikar Din, there's no reason not to, but it's a knas of the chamin that if you ate, according to the Manda Amar, Tan Einam Abdul, it's a knas chachamin. We don't pass in that way, but that Manda Amar is holding that this knas will only be if you ate tonight. So in this parak zman of achila of night, then now you already like messed it up by pushing out Havdalah and eating. Tomorrow, it's breakfast time. It's like a new, as far as people are concerned. So then it's like a new time of achila. So now there's a new time of achila. It's breakfast time. So you have a new chance to be able to say, and mitzad the kanas, then now do the Havdalah before you eat, and you can do a tikkun for what you did the night before. Not that it's really a new zman, but mitzad kanas, mitzad the, I think the way people look at it, so then this mandamra would hold that tomorrow helps. And the Gemara goes on to say then also Shmamina HaMavarach Tzarech Sheyitom. So the Rashbam says that means Tzarech Sheyitom means him or one of the other people listening. V'shtiyas echad mehem yatzu kulan. Like the Gemara says in Erevin, as long as one drinks, then everyone's yotzei. It's talking about whether you should make. There's more has a back and forth over there whether you should make Havdalah. I'm sorry, you should make Shechianu on Yom Kippur on a kos or not. And the question is, how could you do it? You can't drink it. So it says that maybe you could make a bracha and leave it to drink till tomorrow. So it says you can't do that because it's Amvar Tzarech Sheyitom. So the Gemara says V'leisili Yanuka. Once you give it to a child to drink. And so we see that the fact that it asks the question, give it to a child to drink, then that helps as well. So as long as somebody drinks, then everyone's yotzei. And it says, we paskin not like that mandamar because we will on Yom Kippur, it's better not to have anybody drink and not to do the kos at all because people will come to make a mistake and end up drinking on Yom Kippur. So we see in this Havamina that we needed a kos. It would have been enough to have a tinok drink it. So we see from there that it's enough that anyone drinks to be yotzei. And also shmamina demavar tzarech sheyitom atchila. So the Rashbam says that we see that there's also from the back and forth of the Gemara over there that the ideal thing would be that the mavarach should make a bracha, should drink it, because the first Havamina was we should leave it till tomorrow and let him himself drink it the next day after Yom Kippur. So no, okay, that we shouldn't do. So then the next level is to give it to a tinok. So we see that the chatchila is that the mavarach should be tohem. But Yevid, anyone who drinks is also, as long as someone drinks out of it, then you're yotzei. But he ends off the Rashbam. You should not make a bracha on a kos if somebody is not going to drink from it. The Lashon Rashbam is a little difficult to me. That it should be usher. What is it? Ein mevarach on al kos. It's like mashma. It's like not so nice to make a bracha on a kos if no one's going to drink from it. It's usher. What do you mean? It's a bracha levatala. If no one's drinking from it, it's a bracha levatala. You make a brachas and then in. I mean, it's not nice to make a grape eitz and not eat the apple. What do you mean not nice? It's a bracha levatala. It's a mamish usher. This Lashon Rashbam seems to be very strange. I think perhaps it's built on the Lashon of Rashi in Memam and Beis over there in Erevin. The famous Rashi there. There's a Shuvas Aran about there's a lot of Achronim speak about this Rashi. The Rashi says it over there that when it says Leisu Lianuka, because why do we have to give it to somebody to drink? Because Rashi says it's a ganaihu lakos shel bracha. It would be a ganai to the kos shel bracha if somebody wouldn't drink from it. If you made a bracha very pure guffin. How can you say Ganai Lakos? It's a bracha levatala. It's a Ganai. That's all it is a Ganai. So a friend of mine once explained this, Michael Haston from Indianapolis, when I went through sugis many years ago. So he went to say a vort, which afterwards we found many rayas to, is that when the Gemara says in brachas, in Shekesem Avarchin, that there were mala the bracha of yain to break Pri Hagafen. They made an ilu in that bracha because yain is mesameach Elokim ba'anoshim. It brings simcha. Ain't shira el al yain, and there's no shira except for yain. Yain is a davar shel shira. That's why they made Mesakim to do a lot of mitzvahs on a kos yain because it elevates the mitzvah. It's a chaver of the mitzvah. It brings like a shira to the mitzvah to do it on yain because ain't shira el al yain. So there's two dinim in the bracha brei Pri Hagafen. Every brei Pri Hagafen has a din birchas hanenin, like any other bracha, like any other. But also the fact that they were malet to be a new madrega of a bracha. So they put into the brei Pri Hagafen. It's also a birchas hashir. It's a different. It's not just birchas hanenin. It's a birchas hashir because in shira el al yain. This is a big aricha. This is arichas about the sisod. I'm just mentioning it, quickly. But once you say that there's a birchas hashir in it as well, when you perform a mitzvah on a kos yain, make a brei Pri Hagafen, we have different times. We have there's a shaila with the birchas nesuin. So or different times that you make a bracha on a kos. Sometimes we don't drink it. How could that be? Or you give it to somebody else to drink. That it's not a bracha vatala because Lamaisa, Rashi is telling us that even though you're not mitzad the birchas hanenin, you're not mekayim anything, but a bracha vatala it's not. Because sof kol sof you're mekayim on it birchas hashir even without drinking it. You're doing a mitzvah with a kos yain with the birchas hashir, so that chelik of the bracha is kicking in, so you can't say it's a bracha levatala. Ganai it is. It's not nice because there is an aspect of birchas hanenin. You're not mekayim that unless somebody drinks from it as well. And for that, you can even give it to a tinok, even though the tinok is not shaykh to the mitzvah really. He's not. It doesn't say it has to be a tinok sheikiyah the chinuk or anything like that. That's a question. But you give it to someone to drink, it takes away the ganai lakos. But even without that, it wouldn't be a bracha levatala because it's birchas hashir. That's why the Rashbam over here says that. But if someone doesn't drink it, you shouldn't make the bracha when no one's going to drink it. Only because of ganai lakos, not because it would be a bracha levatala.
So Rabbi, based on that, we learned earlier, I think that Shulchan Aruch was posek that if a person wants to make a bracha for somebody else, he's not allowed if they know how to make a bracha for themselves. So would we say that that if it's like, let's say like a nisuin or something, and somebody else is going to drink, so normally we would say you shouldn't make the bracha for them because they know how to make it themselves. But in this case, we would say that that's not a bracha levatala because, or like even in that case, I don't know, would we say that's a bracha levatala? Let's say I didn't follow Shulchan Aruch and I made the bracha for somebody that knew how to make the bracha for himself, but I made it for him. Is that a bracha levatala, or do we like?
No, it's not the most ideal thing, but it's for sure not a bracha levatala. As long as they're going to be drinking it, no. But this also explains though that birchas hanenin, I can't be motzi somebody else birchas hanenin if I'm not going to taste myself as well. That I can't do. So how could I? Why is yain different? So we say like on kiddush, for example, I can go to make kiddush for somebody Friday night. We spoke about this earlier in the prayer. I can make kiddush somebody Friday night, even though I'm not drinking at all. There's an old lady, needs someone to come make kiddush for her. I already made kiddush myself, or I'm going to make kiddush later. I can go in and I can make kiddush for her and not drink at all and make Pri Hagafen. There's a question if I can do it Shabbos day, but Friday night for sure you can. It's machlokas during Shabbos during the day. Friday night for sure I can. I'm making Pri Hagafen. So one tear it's a birchas hanenin and I'm not drinking from it. How could I do that? I can't make a Pri Hagafen just for you. So one teretz that's given over there is that we spoke about this previously, way back, that many consider the Pri Hagafen since the kiddush depends on that. So then that turns into a birchas mitzvahs. And birchas mitzvahs, I could be mitzvah somebody else if I'm not being yotzei. But now we're saying
isn't that what we just Isn't that what Rebbe just asked before about the Rashbam that said that it's not true by brachos? It's the same thing. Are we saying Kiddush is a bracha or Kiddush is a mitzvah? If Kiddush is a mitzvah, it's not even a shaila because it's a mitzvah. It's not even a bracha. It happens to be that you're making a Borei Pri Hagafen. Otherwise, we would have the answer to that Rashbam because it would be actually a bracha as well. And that's why you would say Chaviva Mitzvah B'Shaita over there.
Those who say that teretz, the Rishonim or the post who say that teretz that is brachos and mitzvahs, so we have to know how to understand this Gemara. I'm just offering another Nakuda as well, is that wine is always different. Gafen is always different because it's a brachos shira. It's never betzim brachos v'tala because you're doing shira al yain. So that's maybe another reason why you could do it. But the nafkamina between the two studim would be whether it's brachos and mitzvahs or because it's something special about Borei Gafen. What about being motzi somebody if I don't have yain? What about being motzi them in let's say a shackle if they're using Chemer Medina? So if it's only because of the special nature of yain, I don't have the special. I'm not making brachos shira. I'm making shackle. If I'm using schnapps, let's say, if that's all there is. But if it's beside brachos and mitzvahs, if that's what I'm using for right now for the mitzvah, then that would turn it into a brachos mitzvah as well. That shackle would then become a brachos mitzvah. That's what I'm using. We don't say the kiddush.
It's hamotzi also. Is it motzi also an ashira? Because if you're making kiddush on bread instead of wine,
there's a question whether it's considered brachos mitzvahs or not.
I'm saying, but if you make it on bread as opposed to wine, if you don't have wine and you have to make it on bread, it would be the same shaila.
Same shaila. One last thing I want to speak about. It's already over time, but I just want to maybe just at least touch on this point. The Gemara and off one more shmamina tamo pugmo, and then that we're assuming over here the havamina is we're assuming that we're talking about a coast that has more than a shear. Let's say it has a Sibiyotze Tosos later on in the parak. Tima needs at least to be Mali Lugmov. So it needs to at least be a coast of a Revius plus a Mali Lugmov. Because we're talking about, we're not talking about, because it's a different shmamina that you need a shear. So talking about over here, the Tagma Pugma, even if a shear will remain, you're still pugging the yain. And then Ravashi later on in Kufa B'Maralav is docha that. It says, no, Ravashi Amar Tama Pugma, Kosher Brachat Sar Shear, Chadam Ilsi, it's all one thing. My time at Tama Pugma, Mishum Kos Brachat Sar Shear. Why is it pugim it? Because it needs a shear. So then there's a Magen Avraham that brings B'Shem, I think, I forgot who, or Lazar Mintz, I forgot who, something with Mintz. Because Magen Avraham brings that the lashon of Tama Pugmo, according to this, is lashon like begimas of Mizbeach or begimas of Sakin. It's a Pugmo, Namitzad, it's apostolus, but it's just missing something. Now, the Lafuke, that's actually a pagam in it. So then we have a Peldika thing that it goes on to say that. So Ravashi comes along and says, "There's no din of Tama Pugmo. If there's a shear, it's not a problem. It's not pogim anything. It's only problem is you're missing a shear." Then the Gemara goes on to say, "Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi kapi nachatz v'gima." Yaakov was makpid on if you have a pitcher, which you drink a pitcher of yain and you drink some out of there, then it's pogim it. Rabbi Bar Shisha kapi kasa v'gima. He was kosher only for a kos. Marbar Avashi kapi afila chavita v'gimta. He's makpid even on a chavis, even a whole barrel. If you drink from it, it's also pogim. So it's a pella that, first of all, why they say kapid? Why is the lashon kapid? Like he's main makpid. If they're all being cholik on Ravashi and they're saying that we have a shmamin off in the brisa, then it's a din of the brisa. What it's mashman like it's like they're being makpid. And also it's a pella that Marbar Ravashi is being cholik on his father, mamash bikatza lekatza. His father said Ravashi wasn't makpid on gam at all, even on a kos. And he comes along, he's makpid even for a barrel. His cholik on his father so far, even on a barrel, he's being makpid. The Rashban says over here that the whole din of Pegima is only Chatchila. He ends off the Rashban after all these shitas when he says it's Makbi Akasa Pegima. Miu in ein lo ela kos yain pogam mekadosh lo the kapid chatchila mashma. The word kapid is mashma only chatchila. But yeah, but it's okay. On that, Tosas asks, if it's only a kapid chatchila, then how can the Brisa have said before that it's a reason to push off Havdalah in order not to have a kos pogam? If it's only the chatchila, so be kind Havdalah properly. Be mekayim properly and drink kos pogam, and b'diavad you'll bench on a kos that's pogam because b'diavad it's okay. How's that a reason to push off Havdalah, which is an iser, eat more Havdalah just because of a din chachila kos pogam? Must be that it is ma'akev. So I think we have to say, we need more time for this really, but I'll throw this out to you so you can think about it. That I think that according to the Rashbam, what the Rashbam is saying, if you look carefully through all his words, what he's learning is that it's true. The Brisa, originally when we were dying from the Brisa and says, Shomer Atama Pagmo, we thought that that's a din that's Ma'akev Mamish, and that's why you had to push off Abdullah. When Rashi came along and said there's no such din, so all these Amoraim are agreeing with Ravashi that there is no such din from the Brisa. Nevertheless, since there was a Havamina like that, and there's a Sforah like that, so they had their own kapeda, their own makbid. Not that there's a din like that, not that it's a chiyuv, but it's only that they had their own kapeda. And Marbar Ravashi held that once there's a svor of kapeda, because it's like Moas, or it's not so geshmak to make kiddush from yain that was drunk out of. It's not just a question of shiur, but it's not geshmak. It's sort of like not muhuder to do that. So then it doesn't matter if it's a small amount or a big amount, even a chavis. Now he's not cholik on his father at all for carrot. He's being masking to his father that it's not Meikar Din. And all Ravashi was saying is not Meikar Din. He was just docha the diuk from the Brisa. Ravashi wasn't saying what he holds, what you should do the Maisa. Maybe there is a room to be makbid. So his son was very machmir, very makbid, even on a chavis guma, but he's not cholik on his father at all. There's no mikatza over here at all. And that's why in Achami before we thought it was shot in the Brisa, and then we understood that it's a din, not just l'chatchila, it's mamish meikar din. But Rashi's docha that now it's only remains nothing but a kapeda. That's why they use lashon kapid. It was their own kapeda, not that there was a chiyuv to do it. So that's very geshmak. What remains now that we say that, now Tosas really becomes difficult. Tosas that is not learning this way. Tosas is saying that. Is being cholik on Rashban and saying it can't be a din l'chatchila because why would we be docha kiddush? So we see that docha Abdullah, Tosas is learning it's all one sugya, and those that were makbid, they're makbid because they learned they're cholik on Rashi and and they hold that that's shot in the Brisa, and we're docha Abdullah because of this. So we're not going back from that. We're not going with the Rashi. So then, according to Tosas, the kasha comes back. Why is it lashon kapid? And how could it be that, okay, it's a ha'ara, it's not a kasha, but that Marbar Ravashi is cholik on his father, mamish mikatza l'katza, or in Tosas is mamish cholik on him. So, and why lashon kapid? That's a sort of a pella. There's more to talk about over here. I think we're a little bit out of time. I have a whole shtickle Torah here, but I can't hold you too long because I have a shtickle Torah. I should hold you so long. So, okay. Just know that there's more to talk about in Talmud Pogma. I'll just say that there's to talk about it too short is a little bit nothing time left gone. So, anyways, just ending off. So. After this is the last year now until Pesach, Mr. Hashem, because now we have a Pesach break coming up, and give everybody a break. But I'm, as I mentioned in the email, I'm going to be Mr. Hashem away after the week after Pesach for all practical purposes for a few weeks. So there won't be probably a possibility of giving Shiur. I don't think it's going to be possible to do it from Eretz Yisrael. But I might anyway still want to try to maybe give Marmakom something. I would say to keep on going. Everybody should keep on going in the sugyas to try to the goal is to get to Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, which is the end of the sugyas of Kiddush and Havdalah, begins the sugyas of the Seder, which we're obviously not going to do right now. The sugyas of the Seder, maybe some other year we'll be geschmack to do that, to really go through all this. I mean, I'll just say that it's very geschmack going through the Seder, the sugyas of the Seder, and the halachos of the Seder someday. But we do want to finish that off in order that we can, as soon as possible, start the halachos of Kiddush and Havdalah, try to cover all that. Because it's to do the whole parak like we did was kavaldik, but now it will be like a zorev and a kotzer. We plant all the seeds. If we're not kotzer it, we don't go through and do a hilchos Kiddush and Havdalah straight through the Shulchan Aruch, because we touched on many halachas along the way, but really to see it straight through the Shulchan Aruch and Mishnah Berurah, that would be a big loss once we did all this. So I'd like to try to finish the sugyas off, to be able to do that as soon as possible. In the meantime, and I'll send everybody maybe a couple of recordings of maybe some shiurim on the Haggadah or on the Zman that we're in right now.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Good Shabbos, Chag Sameach, and Nesiat Tova after Pesach.
And see you soon.
Ready.
Call to.